I'm on the wrong page. That's the kind of day I'm having today. We did our mock interviews on Monday, and then on Wednesday we got more into reliability and validity, all those sorts of things. But what we're going to be continuing today is to get through the rest of Chapter 7. Today, guys, we're going to be hopefully finishing this. Our second test in here is going to be on Chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7. And at this point, that test is going to be after we get back, because we're not going to do that test on Monday. Even if we got through it all today, I'm not punishing people in this room with a test right before Thanksgiving break. That being said, I'm also not going to punish you with a test the first day back from break either. That would just be mean. I'm anticipating we'll probably have our test in this class the Wednesday we get back from Thanksgiving. Anything that we cover between the time we get back from Thanksgiving and the time we have the last day of classes is what will be on the final exam. At this point, it's looking like it might be one chapter. If that's the way it is, that's the way it is, because we don't cram material just to cram material. I want to remind you, though, please log your service hours. You have to have 5 service hours logged, and I'm telling you again, be generous with the amount of hours that you worked. The folks who are going to be working with me after we get back from break, I'll be sending an email to. I'll also be sending you guys a reflection document for our class as well. Guys, just a reminder that you do have an assignment due on the 27th, and that's so it's done before we get too much further along. 27th is actually Monday. Yes.
It says Monday is the 25th.
Okay, so it'll be next Wednesday then.
So this is due, but on Canvas it's the 25th.
We're going to make it the 27th. All right? See, when I make a mistake, you benefit. So that's fair, right? We covered this a couple of times in class. Does anybody have any questions what I'm asking for here? Okay. We're going to just jump right in today, guys. The other thing, too, is you also have your Chapter 8 and 9 quiz. That's due on the 2nd of December. It counts as a full test grade. So it's a good way to knock out 2 chapters and also to be able to not have to worry about having to study, because the material will be right there with you. And our final exam, which is going to be on Chapters 10 and 11, more likely on Chapter 10, it's going to be on Wednesday, the 11th of December at 10:10 a.m. So guys, just to jump right in, obviously we were talking about how you select employees, how the whole funnel works, how the whole process works. It is on the employer in the United States to make sure they have documentation if somebody is legally allowed to work in the United States. We use a form called the I-9. As some of you are internationals, you're familiar with some of this stuff. I'm not going to quiz you in a lot of detail on this particular part in our test because it's a specialized kind of thing. All I'm asking you to remember is it's the responsibility of the employer to ensure they have documentation. The employee has to provide it sometimes to work, but the employer is responsible for collecting. Let's get into the stuff we really want to cover today. Things that we might test somebody on before they come to work for us. Cognitive ability. Cognitive, what does that word mean? We're talking about somebody's cognition. What are we talking about? Yeah, rationale, brain power, how well we think. Somebody, for example, who is doing quantitative work and they have to do calculations on their feet, we want to see how well they can do those things. Another cognitive ability test might be managing multiple priorities. If you've ever been in a busy restaurant, you can see a manager has to be able to multitask. We may want to measure how quickly they can process information. Physical ability. Again, we talk about the idea that certain jobs require physical endurance, lifting, all these sorts of things. Self-explanatory. Psychomotor tests come down to things like people doing factory work. Has anybody ever seen the inside of a computer? Yeah, well, if you've ever seen circuit boards, they're very intricate, are they not? So if you had somebody whose job it was to repair circuit boards, they have to have good dexterity. They have to have good psychomotor skills, good hand-eye coordination. People who work in sewing factories, for example, also need good hand-eye coordination. So you might do what we refer to as a psychomotor test with those folks. Before I got hired as a teacher, I had to submit a sample of my writing. If you're applying for graduate school, and so some of you probably will be if you haven't already, why would somebody want to see your writing before they hire you? Why might they be interested in knowing if you can string sentences together? Help me out, guys. We'll move quicker that way. Yes? Yeah, absolutely right. Is this person writing at a collegiate level? If you're applying for a master's degree, do you write at a master's level, for example? And then we get into what we refer to as situational judgment tests. And that means, for example, we might ask somebody, okay, and this is a question I always used to use when I was hiring technical staff. If you had multiple priorities due on the same day, and you had multiple people asking you for things that all went into part of your job, how would you prioritize? So the reason you ask those kinds of questions is you want to see if somebody's got good judgment. Let me give you an example. If you've got 3 priorities today, one of them is for a project deliverable that's due tomorrow, one of them is due for a piece of marketing that's due next week, and one of them is something the boss really cares greatly about, but really could wait a couple of weeks. How would you prioritize what you were doing first? So we got the first part that's project related, and it has to be done by tomorrow. We got marketing piece that's due next week, and we got something that the boss is very convinced is immediate in nature, but can really wait. How do we prioritize? Yes?
I would probably do first the thing tomorrow. Then, if the dinner is due next week, and if I have enough time to do it, I would probably do it for the thing that my boss wants to do first. And then
Exactly right. There are lots of different ways you can answer that question, but Lucia's answer says that she is somebody, if we had an organization that needed tasks done in an orderly manner and was a task-driven organization, she would be an ideal hire. Somebody who said, satisfy the boss's needs first, some organizations might prefer that answer if they're an authoritarian type of organization. That's a very basic example, but we might ask somebody's situational judgment. And if we don't want to do these kinds of tests in-house, we could send somebody to an assessment center where the skills can be tested. Then we get into personality evaluations. How many of you have ever taken the Myers-Briggs or a similar personality test? Did you learn anything about yourself through that test that you didn't know?
Yeah, I think we took
The Big 16, nice. We're going to talk about the Big 5 today. The Big 16.
Yeah, so like, actually found out that I'm the same as Bobby Anderson, which is kind of funny, and I didn't really realize that, like, I thought I was, like, a lot lesser, but, like, didn't have the right skills that a successful person does, or whatever, but, like, he's the same way, that he's successful, so.
You know what else will happen to you at some point in your life? Believe me, it's coming. You're going to open your mouth and your mom's going to come out. It happened to me like 10 years ago. It's like my mom would have said that. It's like, oh my God, I'm becoming my mom or I'm becoming my father. We all do eventually. Here's the other trick too. Look at pictures of your parents because you'll look like them someday. Anything that you don't like about your parents, believe me, there are things I don't like about my dad and I got them. It just happens, guys. So in terms of there's worse things that could happen. Our parents are pretty awesome. But we test for personality to also find out, are you the right person to work in a given department? If we had somebody who's an introvert who absolutely cannot improvise and is not good when things go off schedule, are they the right person to run a comedy club? Hell no. If you have somebody who cannot keep themselves organized, is not detail-oriented, and cannot figure out math, do we want them to run an accounting department? No, those are skills and personality. That's why we put this stuff in. Personality testing is really taking off these days, but there are some issues. Faking is a big one. There are some people who are really good at faking out these tests. They know how to come across the way that people want them to. They know how to give the answers people want them to say. And we also have persons with disabilities, for example. Some people with certain mental conditions or disabilities may respond to some of these tests differently than other people. A good example is if someone is on the autism spectrum, they may have a harder time with things like eye contact. That doesn't mean they're not a good person. It means we have to make sure that we are looking at other things than just a personality test. The Big 5 is kind of a classic in management literature in terms of how you would evaluate somebody on these criteria. Extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and openness to experience. Now, extroversion is self-explanatory. Are you an outgoing person? Do you enjoy environments where you have to do like what I'm doing right now? If you don't enjoy this, you probably shouldn't be teaching because it requires it. That being said, there are situations where extroversion doesn't work really well. For example, if I were a woman, I would make a terrible Carmelite monk. Nun, I should say, because I talk too much. One of the Carmelites' big vow, the nuns up here, none of you guys know? Oh my goodness, yeah, the Carmelite nuns up here take a vow of silence. They seriously don't talk to anybody in the outside world. They have one day a year where they get visitors. Seriously, like they're cloistered nuns. You guys didn't know about the Carmelites. Well, yeah, because they're behind a wall, because they're cloistered.
Why?
Because they've chosen to isolate themselves from the outside world to garner their relationship with God. Yeah, so they have visitors from the outside world once a year that they can talk to. They can talk to each other, but they don't talk to the outside world. So it's not technically about silence. So it's more like they're not like free range nuns. Free range nuns can roam in the forest and go out in the world. That's terrible. I shouldn't joke about that stuff. Yeah, free range nuns. They're everywhere. Wow. But these are definitely penned in nuns. They stay there and they. I'm going off the rails here real quick. Let's get back on here. I'm sorry if I offended anyone. Anyway, I would be a terrible Carmelite nun because I'm way too extroverted. So, what's that? Yeah. Well, agreeableness means, are you good at negotiating with people? Agreeable, somebody who seeks consensus, for example, is agreeable as opposed to being confrontational. Now, there are some people, for example, or some situations where being too agreeable would make you not good at the job. If you're too agreeable and are able to get along with everybody, are there jobs that you would not be qualified for? If you were suing somebody because they hit your car and you wanted to collect money damages, do you want an agreeable attorney? No, I want somebody who's going to kick ass, take names, and give me my money. So I don't want an agreeable attorney. That being said, if I'm going to see a counselor, if I'm having some personal problems, I don't want somebody who's going to yell at me about what a terrible person I am either. I'm going to want somebody who's agreeable. Conscientious means, are you somebody who shows up for work on time? Are you organized? Are you always ready to get to work? Or do you have an easy time blowing things off? If you work at a fast food restaurant, that may be less important for conscientiousness than somebody who works in an ER. Somebody works with patients, but conscientiousness is important for both, because do we really want people who aren't conscientious messing with our food? I hope not. Then we get neuroticism. Now that comes across, when we think about somebody being neurotic, what do we picture? You see, that guy is neurotic. What do we mean? I'm sorry? Yeah, moms are often neurotic, definitely. They get a little crazy, a little hyper-committed about things. They worry all the time. Well, in this sense, neuroticism can be a positive thing. It just means how focused are you on taking care of important details. And openness to experience, what we mean by that is, are you able to deal with a rapidly changing work environment? For example, have you ever been in a classroom? I always use classroom examples because we have that in common. Have you ever been in a classroom, for example, where something got off in the presentation or in order of the class and the teacher absolutely fell apart? Has that ever happened? Or have you seen somebody, what happens? The person was relying on their slides too much or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And it was all over. It was like something like, the source of my power is gone. I no longer can conduct this class. So somebody who is not good on their feet probably shouldn't be in places where you need to have rapid response. For example, if you work in a medical center, if you work in a classroom, if you work as a musician for that matter, somebody has to be open to rapidly changing things that are different every day. If you like a regimented experience where every day is the same, you maybe have less openness to experience. That doesn't mean you can't potentially be a great employee. It just means you have a different tolerance for it. So, guys, this stuff also can play into something we call emotional intelligence. By show of hands, how many of you have ever heard this term? Does anybody know, what does emotional intelligence mean?
Reading and understanding other people's feelings and how they act.
That's a great definition. It is. And emotional intelligence is very important, especially in the modern workplace. Because think about this for a second, guys. We've got 5 generations in the workplace. We've got people who are traditionals and baby boomers who come from older generations. Are older generations as good at expressing their feelings as younger generations? No. It's particularly when we think about things like grief or anger. We'll bottle it up. We're not going to express it. We're not going to disagree. We're going to bottle this stuff up and nail it down. And then we've got people in my generation who sometimes get a little flying off the handle. And then we've got millennials and Gen Z who are very in touch with their feelings and emotions. So emotional intelligence is being able to read, how is somebody really feeling, even if they're not expressing it overtly. So having high emotional intelligence, this also means, by the way, guys, knowing how to motivate people. Here's something nobody in management really wants to talk about. Not everybody in your organization is going to be a top performer, and that's okay. Different people are motivated by different things, and that's okay. It means if you have the intelligence to realize how your words are affecting somebody, how your strategies for pulling people into your management style are affecting them, if you can read those things and reward people in the way they want to be rewarded, you'll be a successful leader. There are people who sit in every class that a professor teaches who will never care if they get an A. And there are going to be some people who don't care if they learn a damn thing so long as they get the A. Different kinds of motivation and understanding the emotional connections to those things will make you a successful leader. Here's the other trick too, knowing when to back off, knowing when to change your approach. This is a politically touchy subject, but I'm going to go there anyway because it's important for us to talk about. One of the challenges we have, not just age, we've got a gender diverse workforce right now. And so you have females now who are managing men, you have men who are managing women, you have women managing women, and every other combination you can think about. And we characteristically, if you go by the literature and the research, we sometimes handle our feelings in the workplace differently. It's not uncommon, for example, if a female executive has a tough meeting, that you might catch her crying in her office. It's not uncommon, if you catch a male executive who had a very stressful meeting, to watch him walk somewhere and start yelling. That's different expressions of emotion. And there are women who yell and there are men who cry too. It doesn't mean one is right or wrong. It means knowing this stuff and knowing how the expression of emotion happens is part of emotional intelligence. And this is the biggest thing that it took me 20 years of being a manager to really realize. So much of the conflict we get into in the workplace, or in this matter in the classroom, so much of the time when you're the leader, it's not really about you. When somebody's having a bad experience, oftentimes it's about them. And a good leader will know the difference and know what you can change and what you can't. Do you agree or disagree? What are your thoughts? That was a big verbal rant there. Yes?
I agree. I think there are some times that you can change how they are feeling. You just gotta be with them and make them feel that you support them and you are with them.
I agree. It's tough to do sometimes, too. And when I say this, guys, as the oldest person in the room, as a Gen Xer and a male, in the United States, this is how males are taught to deal with their feelings. Gen Xers in particular. Suck it up, bottle it up. If you need to, after the workday, go out and drink for a while. And that's the way that my generation was brought up. We were the tail end of the baby boomers. And so people in my position, in my age group, need to learn how to work better in a more emotionally open and expressive environment. And it can be very challenging for some people. I think in education, maybe we do okay with it. And I think, I'd really love to hear your opinions about this. I think one of the reasons we do is because so much of the time we spend working shoulder to shoulder with people who are younger generations than us. When I meet my friends who don't work in education, for example, I find that people in my own generation have more rigid opinions on things than my fellow educators. So what do you think? Am I barking up the right tree there? Do you agree or disagree? I probably asked the question very poorly. I do that too. Hey, at least I'm not making fun of nuns anymore. I mean, it's a step up, right? So, what was Tonkin's class like this semester? He really taught us how to break a man's skull. Then he insulted some nuns. Then he asked us how we felt about his emotional health. I can see that's going to be all over my idea, but I also going to be like, get this man out of the classroom. He's doing damage. But seriously, do you think, in terms of intergenerational communications, am I on the mark or am I missing the mark? What are your thoughts?
Can you rephrase it one more time? I'm sorry.
I certainly can, because I'm not speaking well today either, because I'm thinking about Thanksgiving too. When we start talking about emotional intelligence, I think that people who work in environments where they're regularly interacting with people outside of their own generation have a better affinity to the way that other generation or generations handles their emotions than people who don't work in diverse environments. In the example I use, for example, most of my friends who are in my age group don't work in education. And so when I see them after a period of time, for example, I sometimes have a more emotionally open approach to things than maybe they do because I'm around younger people more than they are. Is that okay how I stated that? Okay. By the way, so, you have your cast off. I didn't even notice that. That's fantastic. So, any thoughts about the long rant I just unleashed upon you? Yes?
I think what you just said is facts. It's obviously that when you are when you spend a lot of time with some people, you end up understanding them better, and you put yourself in those positions. It's easier to see different perspectives when you are living with them and spending more time with them.
That's good to hear. I appreciate your perspective. Yes?
Yeah, mine's kind of similar to his. I think it's just a kind of thing that you have to be in that situation to understand that situation. So like you said with your friends, no matter how you break it down to them, they just won't understand that unless they spend this amount of days a year with people that are not really nice.
I think it's a healthy thing too, by the way. I think that one of the best things I've seen, I don't know if any of you have seen this in the news, it's a practice that some countries are trying now where they're putting daycare centers in retirement homes. Have you guys heard about this? And they're seeing that the older folks who are normally getting to that point in their life where their brains are shutting down are re-engaging because they're around kids. Because young people are around them and reminding them what life is all about. I had goosebumps thinking about that. What a great idea. Yes?
My mom's a teacher too, and it's exactly the same thing as you.
Really?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I think I'm younger because I'm around younger people and stuff.
Well, I get it. Well, I'm glad to hear your mom say that, and I didn't know your mom was a teacher. That's awesome.
English teacher.
No kidding. Wow. And I think the thing about it is sometimes, I bet your mom sometimes forgets how old she is too, right? I know I do. Sometimes it's like, wow, Tonka, you're pushing 50. How did that happen? It's the alternative, better than being dead. Way better than being dead. In terms of some of the dimensions of emotional intelligence, because we're going to keep going here, guys. Sometimes I think this is one I struggle with, maybe is a little self-awareness. And sometimes it's very tough to know how we're coming across to other people. It's really good, though, people who are able to check in with themselves and maybe critically evaluate how they're coming across, tend to be more successful in management. I'll give you an example. I'm working on a student-run project here with our Enactus team. And I really thought I had a great plan for this project. And what I was not realizing was I was falling back into my older management style. And as a result, I was disenfranchising people until I had a couple of folks come to me and say, Mr. Tonkin, we're having a problem with how you're doing this stuff because you're dictating this stuff. You're telling us what to do. And I had to realize at that point I needed to work on my self-awareness. And that's a trick too. We can work on our self-awareness by asking the people around us if they're good people and willing to give us an honest opinion. And we have created an environment where they realize they can talk to us and not have us just get angry. We can find out a lot more how we're coming across. And when you evaluate somebody's emotional intelligence, their own awareness of these things, somebody might by default be an abrasive, abrupt person. But that doesn't mean they can't be aware of it and work on it. So in terms of social awareness, being aware of the people around you and showing empathy to their needs. For example, if you are hiring people, having high amounts of social awareness in particular industries is absolutely essential. If you have somebody who you're hiring to work in healthcare who has no empathy toward other people, are they going to be a good nurse or PA? I think not. Has anybody here ever had an experience with a medical person who really didn't care? Have you had that experience with somebody? Yeah, what was it like?
It was kind of weird. She was just disengaged. She had attitude the whole time.
And if somebody is basically saying, I'm going to stick this needle in your arm, but I really don't care about you, I don't want that person sticking a needle in my arm. I'm not just a piece of ground chuck here. I have feelings. And so that's exactly why we want empathy from those folks as well. Then we get into self-management. If you're in a high-stress position, you've got to be able to maintain some level of emotional self-control. Here's the secret, guys. There are times on this side of the classroom where we have great days and bad days, just like you guys have great days and bad days. The goal is to try to limit the times whenever anybody in the class would guess you weren't having a bad day by your self-management and your own emotional control. Some people are by default more glass half full kind of people, optimists. Those people believe there's always a way we can find a solution, and they become adaptable, for example. In terms of social awareness, that means is somebody capable of inspiring greatness in other people. I'll give you a great example of an inspirational leader in my life. I say this, and I mean this 200%. Dr. Fry is one of those people who inspires greatness in the people that he hires because he lives by example. That man would never ask you to do something he wouldn't do himself. If he's expecting you to put in a 60-hour week, it's because he's put in a 70-hour week. He leads by example, which causes influence for the rest of us. And so if you're hiring somebody, and somebody has to lead people, their social awareness may also be an important dimension of emotional intelligence for you to think about. When we start thinking about honesty and integrity tests, what are we talking about, guys? Why would we want to make sure, in what particular industries or positions might honesty and integrity be exceptionally important? For sure. If we're dealing with money, if we're dealing with patient records, if we're dealing with confidential information, we want to make sure that somebody has high degrees of integrity. Who here is familiar with a company called Equifax? I'm going to tell you about why honesty and integrity are important. Does anybody in this room know? In the United States, there are several companies that do all the credit ranking and credit checks for almost everyone in the country. How many companies are there? Anybody have a guess? 2? Not many more. 3. There's a total of 3 companies in the United States that control your credit ranking, what loan rates you're going to get, how hard it's going to be for you to get a mortgage, what your financing is going to look like for your first car. 3 companies total. Equifax is one of those 3 companies. In 2016, right around, I think it was April or May, they found out there was a data breach. Not a breach, let me rephrase that. A vulnerability in their system that meant hackers could easily get in and get the personal information, including the social security numbers, of millions of people. This door could have been closed with a simple patch to the system software. It was the patch the company had already issued. It was basically like a Windows patch. Install it, you'll be good. Nobody in the company did. By the time we hit August of that year, about one point, I think it was 15 million, 15 or 150. I'm trying to misplace my decimal point. Millions of people had their information hacked and leaked onto the dark web because Equifax did not do the system updates. Equifax also waited another 45 days to tell the general public that their information had been hacked. Guys, if you want to talk about honesty and integrity, that's how it can affect you. If somebody in the United States has your social security number, what can they do with it? Anything. It's the default password for all of your passwords, all your banking, all your interactions with the federal government. If you lose your social security number and somebody gets it, it can cause you a world of hurt. And because nobody at Equifax got that, we ended up having millions of people have their credit at risk because one of 3 companies responsible for it didn't do what they were supposed to do. What I'm about to give you right now is a little reward for you guys being here today, because I'm going to be giving you our next bonus question, because it involves the polygraph test. The polygraph test, also known as the lie detector, cannot be used for pre-employment screening, but there are some positions when they can use it after a conditional offer of employment has been made, like if you're working for the Department of Justice or whatnot. Here's what's interesting. Does anybody know who invented the polygraph? Oh, this is where it gets good. Dr. William Marston. Dr. William Marston also invented the most recognizable female superhero ever. Who am I talking about? What's Wonder Woman's secret weapon? The lasso of truth. Anybody who gets roped by the lasso has no choice but to be compelled to tell the truth. The guy who invented the lie detector test invented Wonder Woman, and her lasso of truth is basically the polygraph. How cool is that?
What's his name?
Dr. William Marsden, M-A-R-D-S-T-E-N. That will be a bonus question on our next test. And you're here today, so you get it. Dr. William Marsden. Look it up. And anyway, guys, I think it's pretty interesting that sometimes that stuff plays out that way. Before we get into the next section, because I've been jawing at you something fierce and talking some utter nonsense from time to time today, I would like to pause for a question from anywhere in the room. One question, because there's a small group of us today. What would you like to ask? Yes. Yes, you can. That doesn't count as a question, though. You don't ever have to ask. You can just go. Ask me a question or make a statement about anything.
Could you repeat the name?
Dr. William Marston.
William Marston.
Yeah, just look up Wonder Woman's creator. You'll find it. Ask me a question. That was just a repeat. Ask me a question. Yes.
Okay. If you have to decide what would you choose? To know everything, okay, to know everything that you know right now, or to know everything that you don't know right now, with no choice.
Wow.
Like would you give up everything that you know for the things that you don't know?
No.
Like you will not be able to know your family, but you will know like all the secrets of everything.
When I think about the things that have made me who I am today, every wonderful thing, every ounce of pain, every ounce of goodness, I would hang on to that stuff for the rest of my life. Come on in, Dr. Miko. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Miko.
Yes, fantastic. What's going on?
Football's out today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Football field.
We have a whole row of football players.
Really?
Yeah.
What class is this?
This is Management 201. Yeah. Would you like to join us?
I would just like, when your class is over, Jared, can you come see me? It's not nothing bad. It's actually really good.
All right. Whatever Jared's good news is, congratulations, Jared.
I don't know if that's for an opportunity that could be good.
Dr. Miko and I have had a running conversation going for about the last couple of days here. We've been talking about how old a hoagie can be and still be edible. I brought a hoagie that was made last Friday into the office last week, and they still have about this much of it, and I'm debating whether or not I should eat it
I thought you were
today.
going to eat that today.
I had a working lunch today. I forgot about it.
Oh,
There's still dinner, though. There's still dinner. So what do you think? This hoagie is now, it's a roast beef and cheese hoagie, and it's now officially 1 week old today.
What cheese?
It's got cheese on it. Yeah.
What cheese?
Provolone.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, it's alright.
That's the
Provolone's alright.
How much does it have mayonnaise?
No mayonnaise. No mayonnaise.
Stands a little.
So there's no dairy product other than the cheese. So you think, wait, by show of hands, who here thinks I should try to eat the hoagie?
Absolutely.
All right, Sarah and Jared are the only people who care about me, apparently. But,
Thank you.
but yeah, I would hold on to all the memories this year. I wouldn't give up with them. What about you?
I think my first answer for this was, like when I heard the question the first time, was yes. But then the more I think about it,
Just remember, everything that ever happens to you makes you who you are, even the bad stuff. And sometimes especially the bad stuff makes us better people. I truly believe that. Yes?
If you could combine the superpower of superheroes.
I'd say, that's a really good question. I think it would be cool to be able to fly like Superman, but to have like those adamantium claws like Wolverine. Like to be a flying Wolverine. That would be like the most terrifying superhero ever.
He wouldn't die.
He's immortal. He's indestructible. Nothing can hurt you. What about you?
I'd probably put. I didn't combine Iron Man and Batman.
Yeah, they're kind of similar characters too. They're both rich guys with lots of armor.
Imagine Batman just pushing the button and having the suit ready.
I can deal with that.
And both that knowledge combined.
And they're both richer than God, so that would be amazing. Well, what we're going to do here, guys, we're going to cover maybe one or two more slides, and then we're going to break early so Becky can get ready for her interview today. We're wishing her good luck today, too. Guys, in terms of interviews, why do we do interviews? We do interviews to be able to learn who somebody is. We've seen the resume. We maybe even talk to them on the phone. But you really can't know who somebody is till you're in the same room with them or having some interaction with them. I think in the online world, we get to know people a lot better maybe than we did before because we share so much about ourselves through social media and otherwise. But sometimes I think it really does take an in-person meeting for us to know who somebody is. We may have a brief initial screening interview where you bring somebody in very quickly. This person either has the right personality and the right kind of vibe about them, or they don't. And then we get into the in-depth interview. I really do think that in the modern workplace, oftentimes personality is more important than skills. And I'm not saying skills aren't important. Skills to help you keep the job. But if you've got skills and no personality, I think it's rougher than if you've got personality and the ability to learn. That's my 2 cents. There are exceptions. I don't want somebody showing up with no skills and lots of personality to be a brain surgeon, for example. That's not a good candidate for on-the-job training. But other jobs like managerial training, nobody shows up as an awesome manager. So we also, for example, want to make sure we have inter and intra-rater reliability. And here's what this means. Intra means that you have a person who's able to judge multiple people the same. So for example, if I'm interviewing Sarah, Becky, and Jared, am I able to apply the same standard to all three of them? Am I able to be non-judgmental based on the fact that they're different people? If I'm consistent with the way I rate people, that's called intra-rater reliability. If you have several people in an interview, if everybody in this side of the room is interviewing all the people in this side of the room as a panel, we have high inter-rater reliability. It means that we all are judging on similar standards. Some people score harder than others. If you take 2 or 3 different accounting classes from 2 or 3 different accounting professors at our university, you might find they score differently as well. So intra-rater is within the person, inter is within the panel of people. This will be our last slide for today before we call it a day, because I think we've covered a good amount of stuff. Structured and unstructured interviews. Guys, what might be better about a structured interview than an unstructured interview? Let's say we're interviewing multiple candidates for the same job, and we could either have written down questions or we could wing it. Why might structured be better? Yes?
It's fair to all.
It's fair, we're getting the same information, we're being more objective. On the flip side, what's good about an unstructured interview? Yes?
You might find things out about different people if you just went by the structure of this.
Yeah, if you get an improvisational question, wow, that person had a really interesting background, I'd like to ask more about it. I'm going to say that I think the perfect combination is have structure with some room for some improvisation. Have rock and roll, have your structure with a little room for some improvisation, aka jazz. With that being said, guys, let me say it one more time. Who invented Wonder Woman? Dr. William Marsden. Right? Make sure you know that, guys. And I'm going to let you off the hook 10 minutes early today. Becky, good luck.